When I was 16, I went to a family wedding that was over a long weekend. This was a camping wedding. Our family has this huge piece of land overlooking the ocean, and they set it up like a campground for everyone to crash. It was a lot of fun. There was this one guy who showed up. He was an old friend of the bride from 20 years ago. Apparently she had run into him a few months earlier, and as they got chatting, she spontaneously decided to invite him. It was a pretty casual wedding. Nobody thought he would actually show up, as he lived on the other side of the country. He was the most annoying, creepy weirdo you could imagine. He spent the weekend getting absolutely plastered. He got up and made dramatic speeches nobody asked for. He didn't know the groom, and barely even knew the bride. He was obnoxiously hitting on every woman there, even in front of their husbands. He was interfering with every single going on, and trying to control everything, and whining to anybody who wouldn't listen about how he was recently divorced, and was in a custody battle for his daughter. On the last night there, I was down at the beach with a couple of my male cousins who were around my age. We were drinking some stolen beer, and hanging out around the fire. The guy came down to the beach, and started hanging out with us, and was obnoxiously drunk. He was telling us story after story and we were all having a bad time. He singled me out, the only girl there, and started referring to me by different pet names, and demanding I get him beers. Hey babe, get me a beer. Hey beauty, get me a beer. We all decided we were tired of him, and left to go to bed. My parents and siblings were asleep in their tent, and I retrieved my clothes and toiletries from our car, to walk across the field to the bathroom to get changed and ready for bed. It was pitch black out, could barely see anything. As I was closing the trunk, the guy suddenly appeared at my side. He got up in my face, and started asking me a bunch of creepy questions. Like if I have a boyfriend, how far I've gone with boys, etc. I am really small and he was a huge tall guy. I was paralyzed with fear. I tried to walk away, but I knew that my destination was the bathroom, and I was scared he would try to corner me into there. He kept getting closer and closer to me, until he was in my personal space and had his hands on my shoulders. I was totally frozen, and didn't know what to do. After a few minutes, luckily, another wedding guest walked up to her car and saw exactly what was going on. She interfered, and started a conversation with him to distract him, and gestured for me to go to the bathroom. I ran to the bathroom, got ready, and ran back to my tent. Sleeping next to my parents, my mom woke up, and noticed I was upset. I explained what happened. The next day on the drive home my dad was freaking out, and saying he wished he could have beat the shit out of him. So I was working late shift at this hotel, right? My manager, let's call her Karen, was already super suspect. Her stories never added up. She was always twitchy, she fired people left and right. She said no one could get her in trouble, cause she knew her boss for 16 years. As far as any of the surviving employees thought, her husband, let's call him Joe, was maintenance. Okay, so I got nothing to do but clean every crack and crevice of the lobby, right? It's like 11:30 on my birthday, and I get a call that my grandma, who I haven't seen since I was an infant, might be dying. So I'm trying to get my mind off of this and do my job. Suddenly, Joe walks into the lobby and says, "Hey, I need keys." He claims he's gotta flip some furniture so they can deep clean a room in the morning. Karen and Joe live on the hotel property, so that's why it wasn't strange to see him coming late. Karen also had a habit of coming in late to just say hey. So, he leaves with the key cards. Maybe 15 minutes later, I head to the breakfast room for hot water so I can get the floors scrubbed. Suddenly, Joe walks back in and gets into the closet a few feet from me. Next thing I know, I see Karen hanging out at the door to the entrance. At first I didn't recognize her because she was dressed differently, so I almost greeted her like a guest. Then I was like, "Oh hey. How's it going, Karen?" She kinda looked at me funny, then looked in to see Joe in the closet looking for something. I thought he was getting tools to try and fix something. Then she's like, what's going on?" I said I'm mopping. I guess Joe is flipping some furniture for a deep clean. Suddenly she storms out and Joe runs after her. I'm confused. She comes back while I'm mopping, and flips the script. "Listen here you little bitch, if you and him think I'm dumb, I'm fucking not. Do you hear me, bitch? You bet your little bitch ass I'm gonna check those fucking cameras." I'm not trying to remember all of the demeaning things she said, but that was the gist at the beginning. I wish I was exaggerating this. So I'm standing there, horrified, with a mop in my hand. "I'm sorry Karen, I'm not interested in your husband. He said he came to flip furniture, and I was trying to mop." She puffs up. "Then why the fuck did you look at me the way you did when I walked in? I thought you were a guest." She goes behind the desk to get on the phone to call her boss. I continue to mop, but I'm scared. I hear her say, "This fucking bitch. I'm pretty sure if you check the cameras you will see that whore." She starts to cry. I keep mopping, but I feel sad because she's crying. "Karen, I'm so sorry, I just figured it was you guys' business if you were flipping the furniture, so I didn't ask." Why the fuck did you put yourself in a situation where you were alone with my man? This wouldn't have happened if you didn't put yourself here. I die inside because she's starting to convince me that it's all my fault. I have mop in hand and I'm shaking. She goes to the breakfast room. It's this moment where I tell myself to run. I don't know what she's doing. Everything turns so quick. One minute I'm worrying about family and I couldn't predict what happened next. I tell myself to keep mopping. Shut up and do your job. She's not going to hurt you. Then I think, no, she's gonna come in here and bash your fucking head in. She runs out. Thank God. I wait for a moment and rush to the door to lock it with my set of keys. I call my mom, she calls the cops. I hide behind the desk in tears as I wait. When the cop came up, I was crying. My mother was outside. I threw the hotel keys at the cop and said to tell the manager I quit. I ran to my car and hauled ass home. The cop never followed back up with me on the incident. But he did go up to her room. He knocked on her door and said, "Your desk girl just quit." She walked back to the lobby, laughing. That was according to my mom. When I was 7 months pregnant with my third kid, we put our 2 kids in the van, along with everything we could fit, and drove from the East Coast to the West Coast. My kids were 1 and 3. We stopped fairly often for pee breaks, for me, and to let the kids run around. On the third day, they were especially worked up, so we stopped at a park somewhere in New Mexico. We sat down and let them play on the playground as we had a little picnic. Our 3-year-old was having a blast, but I noticed he kept talking to himself, laughing at his own jokes, and being generally weird. When he came over to eat, I asked him what was up, and he said he was playing with Tony. I asked who Tony was, and he said it was his new friend. Then he started laughing, because Tony was next to him telling him something silly. It wasn't the first imaginary friend he had, but for some reason this one was creeping me out a little. But I just told him to eat up so he could play a bit more before we left. When it was time to go, he was more upset than usual, telling me that Tony didn't want him to go. Tony wanted him to stay with him. Tony said he could stay forever. I was just shivering at this point because I was dealing with pregnancy hormones and, for whatever reason, this was just freaking me out. So I picked him up and carried him screaming to the car. My husband had taken our 18-month-old and we got them both in their seats. I realized I had left my purse behind, so I went to get it. As I turned around to head back to the car, I saw a plaque next to the entrance to the park, right under the sign. It was a memorial dedication to a 7-year-old boy who had been killed when he'd been hit by a car while biking home from the park in the 1980s. His name was Tony. We got in the car and left as fast as possible. We only stopped at McDonald's play places for the rest of our trip.